Imagine a man fighting for his freedom in a country built on the ideals of liberty and justice. His case would ignite a national firestorm and help set the stage for civil war. This is the story of Dred Scott, a man whose courage and determination challenged the Supreme Court and forced America to confront its deepest contradictions. Stay tuned as we dive into the landmark decision that shook the nation to its core. The year was 1857. The United States stood at a boiling point, with tensions over slavery threatening to tear the nation apart. At the heart of this turmoil was a case that would forever change the trajectory of American history: Dred Scott v. Sandford. Dred Scott was an enslaved African-American man who dared to challenge the system that bound him. His case wasn't just a legal battle, it was a question of humanity, equality, and the very definition of freedom. But how did Dred Scott, a man born into slavery, find himself at the center of one of the most controversial Supreme Court rulings in history? To understand the gravity of this decision, we must first explore Scott's life, his journey, and the turbulent political climate of 19th century America. Dred Scott was born into slavery in Virginia around 1799. Like countless others, his life was defined by the inhumane institution of slavery. In 1830, his enslaver, Peter Blow, moved him to Missouri, a slave state. But it was Scott's journey beyond Missouri that would set the stage for his historic case. In the 1830s, he was sold to Dr. John Emerson, an Army surgeon. Emerson's military service took Scott to Illinois, a free state, and Wisconsin Territory, where slavery was prohibited under the Missouri Compromise. Here's where things get interesting. Could living in a free state or territory make an enslaved person free? This was the question that Dred Scott's case would bring to the forefront of American law and society. In 1846, after Emerson's death, Scott and his wife, Harriet, took a courageous step. They sued for their freedom in Missouri courts. Their argument was simple, yet revolutionary. Having lived in free territories, they should no longer be considered enslaved. Initially, the Missouri courts ruled in Scott's favor, granting him and his family their freedom. But this victory was short-lived. The decision was reversed on appeal, sending the case spiraling into years of legal battles. What began as a personal fight for freedom soon transformed into a national debate over slavery, states' rights, and the Constitution itself. By 1857, the case reached the U.S. Supreme Court. At this point, it was no longer just about Dred Scott. It was a test of the nation's identity. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, leading a deeply divided court, issued the infamous decision on March 6, 1857. The ruling declared that Dred Scott, as an African American, was not a citizen and therefore had no right to sue in federal court. Taney went further, stating that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories, effectively nullifying the Missouri Compromise. Think about this for a moment. A single court decision stripped away hope, overturned decades of legislative compromise, and escalated the nation's path toward conflict. This was more than a ruling. It was a national shockwave. The Dred Scott decision sent shockwaves through the country. Abolitionists were outraged, viewing the ruling as a blatant endorsement of slavery. The decision emboldened pro-slavery advocates and deepened the rift between North and South. For African Americans, both enslaved and free, the ruling was a devastating blow. It was a clear signal that the highest court in the land did not recognize their humanity or their rights. But this decision also had unintended consequences. It galvanized the abolitionist movement and further polarized the nation, contributing to the rise of figures like Abraham Lincoln. Just 3 years later, the Civil War would erupt, forever changing the course of American history. Dred Scott's fight for freedom may have ended in heartbreak, but it sparked a movement, and set the stage for a nation to reckon with its deepest moral failings. Dred Scott didn't live to see the Civil War or the abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment in 1865. He died in 1858, just a year after the Supreme Court's decision. But his legacy endures. The case of Dred Scott versus Sandford remains a powerful reminder of the struggles for justice and equality. It's a story of resilience in the face of oppression, of a man who dared to challenge the status quo, and of a nation grappling with the contradictions at its core. Dred Scott's story teaches us that the fight for freedom and equality is never easy, but it's always worth it. His courage lit a spark that would eventually lead to monumental change, proving that even in the darkest moments, the pursuit of justice can reshape history. In 1846, after Emerson's death, Scott and his wife, Harriet, took a courageous step. They sued for their freedom in Missouri courts. Their argument was simple, yet revolutionary. Having lived in free territories, they should no longer be considered enslaved. Initially, the Missouri courts ruled in Scott's favor, granting him and his family their freedom. But this victory was short-lived. The decision was reversed on appeal, sending the case spiraling into years of legal battles. What began as a personal fight for freedom soon transformed into a national debate over slavery, states' rights, and the Constitution itself.